The night I almost drove past a woman crying in a parking garage. I was running 12 minutes late to a dinner I didn't want to attend, wearing a jacket I'd borrowed from my roommate, and holding a bottle of Niagara Peninsula Red that the guy at the LCBO had called an approachable everyday sipper, which I was pretty sure meant it tasted like regret and oak. I'm Graham Ashford. I'm 31. I design commercial spaces for a mid-size firm in Hamilton, Ontario, which means I spend most of my professional life arguing about flooring samples with developers who think reclaimed wood is a personality. I had been single for 8 months. Not the dramatic kind of single, not the eating poutine alone at 1 a.m. kind, just the quiet kind, where Sundays start feeling longer than they used to, and you stop noticing until you do. The parking garage was on James Street North. I was there because my friend Joel had invited me to his engagement party at a tapas place 2 blocks over, and I was already stressed because I had nothing useful to say to Joel's fiancée, who was 24 and worked in crypto and had the kind of energy that made me feel like I'd been assembled from discontinued parts. I was taking the corner toward the stairwell when I saw her. She was standing beside a dark gray Volvo, coat half on, phone in her hand, not crying exactly, but doing that thing people do when they're fighting not to. One hand pressed flat against the car door, like she needed something solid. She was maybe 52, 53. Silver hair cut just below her jaw. She wore a dark burgundy dress that said she had been somewhere that mattered tonight, or had meant to. I almost kept walking. That's the honest part. I almost looked at the scuffed concrete and kept going. She wasn't in danger. She was just a woman having a moment in a parking garage, and people are allowed to have moments and not every moment needs a witness. But then she made a sound. Small, barely audible. The sound of someone deciding to hold something together and losing the vote. I stopped. She looked up when she heard my footsteps slow, and embarrassment crossed her face first. The kind that's worse than sadness. The kind that says, I didn't want anyone to see this. I recognized her then. Her name was Carol Finch. She was the mother of a woman I'd dated for 5 months 2 years ago. A woman named Sasha, who had been bright and restless and wanted things from life that moved faster than I did. Sasha and I had ended quietly, the way 2 people end things when the problem isn't cruelty, it's just incompatibility, and you both know it but take too long to say so. I'd met Carol at Sasha's birthday dinner in Oakville. She'd been the only person at the table who'd asked me what I actually liked about my work, not just what I did. When I said I liked the moment a space stopped being a blueprint and started being somewhere someone would actually live their life, she'd set down her fork and said, "That's a real answer. You don't get many of those at birthday dinners." After Sasha and I ended, I didn't see Carol again. That seemed right. That seemed like the mature thing. I told myself that a lot. This is the mature thing, usually right before I did whatever was easier. "Graham," she said. "Carol," I stopped a few feet away, not close enough to crowd her. "You all right?" She straightened, pulled her coat fully onto her shoulders. "I'm fine. I was just," she stopped. Looked at her phone, looked back at me. Actually, no. I was stood up. I didn't say anything for a second. "Tonight?" "About 40 minutes ago." She exhaled through her nose. "Online date." He canceled by text while I was already seated at the bar. He used the phrase "something came up," which covers everything from a minor emergency to simply changing his mind, and I've been in this parking garage for 20 minutes because I couldn't figure out where else to go. I hated the man immediately, not loudly. Quietly, efficiently, "I'm sorry," I said. "Don't." She said it without heat. "I've had enough, I'm sorry for one evening." I looked at the Volvo. I looked at her. I said, "I'm supposed to be at an engagement party 2 blocks over, then you should go." I was looking for a reason not to. She studied me. "That's not my problem to solve." "No," I said, "it's not. Carol, can I ask you something?" Her eyes shifted. "Careful. Depends on the question." I held my hands up. "Harmless. There's a Vietnamese place on Augusta I've been meaning to try for 6 months and never had a good enough reason to actually go. Would you let me buy you dinner instead of driving home alone right now?" The silence in that parking garage was specific. The kind that hums. Carol looked at me for a long moment. Her expression moved through several things I couldn't name. Then, "You know this is strange." "I know. I'm Sasha's mother. I'm aware. She and I talked about you, after. I'd imagine nothing cruel," she said quickly. "She just said you were kind and it didn't fit." That landed somewhere I wasn't expecting. She was right about both parts. Carol's mouth did something that wasn't quite a smile but was trying. She looked down at her phone, then she dropped it into her purse and looked up. I'm not going home feeling sorry for myself. That sounds like a yes. It sounds like I'm hungry, and the alternative is worse. She pulled her coat closed. Don't read into it. Wouldn't dream of it. She did smile then. Small, dry, real, and something in my chest did a thing I told myself was just relief. The restaurant was small and warm and smelled like lemongrass and something fried in the best possible way. The host gave us a table near the window without us asking, because the place was quiet on a Wednesday, and the host seemed to understand we needed something low stakes. We ordered spring rolls and a shared bowl of Hue beef noodle soup, because Carol said she'd eaten pho her whole life and was ready to expand her vocabulary. I ordered a Sleeman's. She ordered a glass of white wine. We didn't talk about Sasha for the first 20 minutes. We talked about other things. I told her about a commercial renovation I'd just finished in Dundas, a converted textile mill that a couple of restaurant owners wanted to turn into a brew pub without losing the bones of the building. She listened the way she had at that birthday dinner. Like what I was saying was the point, not just filler between her own thoughts. She told me she worked in urban planning for the city of Hamilton, had for 19 years. She said the thing people didn't understand about the job was that it was basically about deciding which version of a place deserved to survive and who got to make that call. That sounds exhausting, I said. It's the best work I've ever done. She tore off a piece of the spring roll wrapper. And yes, also exhausting. When did you get divorced? She glanced at me, but not sharply. 4 years ago. You? Never married. Right. Sasha mentioned that too. She picked up her wine. She said you seemed like someone who wanted the real thing and was terrified of it. I considered that. She wasn't wrong. No. Carol looked out the window at James Street, the streetcar tracks, and October rain. She usually isn't. That's her gift and her inconvenience. She's doing well? She's in Vancouver now. Loves it. A pause. She's seeing someone. A landscape architect named Piers, which sounds made up but apparently isn't. I laughed. The tension I hadn't known, I was carrying loosened a notch. I'm glad. So is she. Carol tilted her head. So am I, for that matter. She was a different kind of anxious when she was with you, not your fault. Just the wrong fit generates its own friction, doesn't it? Yeah, I said. It does. She looked at me then, properly. You look better than you did at her birthday dinner. I was miserable at her birthday dinner. I know. Her voice was gentle. You hit it well, except for your eyes. I didn't know what to do with that. So I said, you've been doing online dating for a while? She made a sound, 7 months, which I offer as evidence that optimism is either a virtue or a disorder, and I haven't settled the question. She turned the wine glass slowly on the table. Tonight was the 3rd attempt. The first 2 were fine in the way that parking lots are fine. Functional, briefly useful, then forgotten. This one I thought might actually work. We'd talked on the phone twice. He seemed present, which is rarer than it sounds. And he bailed by text. While I was fixing my lipstick in the bar bathroom. She said it flatly. So yes, 43 minutes in a parking garage feeling like an idiot. You're not an idiot. I know I'm not an idiot. She said it without defensiveness, just fact. But knowing that and feeling that aren't always on the same schedule. I wanted to say something sweeping, something that would land correctly. Instead, I just said, for what it's worth, I think the guy's an idiot. She smiled into her wine. For what it's worth, so do I. We stayed at that table for 2 hours. Somewhere around the second cup of tea, the conversation shifted. Not dramatically, not with any ceremony, just the way conversations shift when 2 people stop performing ease and start actually having it. She told me about her divorce, said it had been civil, which she described as the loneliest possible outcome, said that her ex-husband Bernard had moved to Kelowna and was teaching high school geography and seemed, genuinely, happier than he'd been in years, and that she'd spent a long time resenting that before she understood it as information rather than verdict. Information about what? I asked. That I had also been unhappy, she said simply, and I'd gotten so good at managing it that I'd stopped noticing. I put down my cup, and now? She looked at me steadily. Now I notice. Something moved between us that I didn't name out loud. I just felt it, the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. Not threatening, just real. We split the bill despite my protests, because Carol said she hadn't asked me to dinner, And she didn't need rescuing, she'd needed company. And company split the bill. I conceded the point because she was right, and because arguing felt disrespectful. Outside, it was colder. The rain had stopped, but the sidewalk was still wet, light from the restaurant windows making it shine. We stood near the corner, and neither of us moved toward leaving. This was nice, she said. It was strange, she added, but nice. In that order, she thought about it. Simultaneously, I looked at her in the October streetlight. The burgundy dress, the silver hair, the way she stood like she'd made a decision and was comfortable with the consequences. I had been aware of Carol Finch from the moment I'd met her, in the way that honest people are sometimes aware of something they're not ready to look at directly. I'd told myself it was respect. It was also more than that, and I'd been mature about pretending otherwise for 2 years. Can I tell you something that might be strange to say? I asked. She raised an eyebrow. You've been strange twice in one evening. Might as well commit. I thought about you after Sasha and I ended. She went still. Not stiff. Still. Not constantly, I said, but occasionally. The way you asked questions. The way you listened. I told myself it was just that I respected you, which was true, but wasn't the complete answer. Carol was quiet for a moment. The streetcar went by on King. Somewhere down the block, someone laughed. Graham, she said. I know. I'm 53. I'm aware. I was at your ex-girlfriend's birthday dinner. I was there, yes. And you're telling me this in front of a Vietnamese restaurant in October. I am. She looked at me, long and clear. Why? Because you spent 40 minutes in a parking garage alone, and you deserve to know that the man who found you there was not sorry he found you. The silence that followed was the specific kind that precedes something changing. Then Carol said, I'm going to need you to understand something. Okay. I'm not a substitute for whatever you didn't get from being with Sasha. You're not. And I'm not a story. I know. And if Sasha finds out about this, the group chat situation will be significant. How significant? She has strong opinions and a very close relationship with her phone. I can handle direct communication. Something broke open in Carol's expression then. Not fell apart, opened, like a window. You're serious? Yes. She looked down the street for a moment, then back at me. One coffee. Next week. In public, somewhere neutral, and we both retain full right of retreat without explanation. That's reasonable. It's very reasonable. She adjusted her coat. I specialize in reasonable. I've noticed. She stepped toward the corner, then stopped. Turned. Graham, yeah. Thank you for not walking past. I didn't answer that. I just held it. She left, heels clicking on the wet pavement, and I stood under the corner light with my borrowed jacket and the leftover warmth of 2 hours of the most awake I'd felt in months. The coffee was at a place on Locke Street that Carol chose because she said it had good natural light and no communal tables, restaurants for people who think forced intimacy is a personality. I arrived early. She was already there. She wore a dark green turtleneck and had her reading glasses pushed up on her head. When she saw me, she said, You're early. You're earlier. I didn't want to be seen arriving after you. It felt like ceding territory. Is this a territorial situation? All first dates are territorial. She handed me a menu. Sit down. The coffee was good. The conversation was better. She told me more about the urban planning work, a contentious infill housing project in the North End that was dividing a neighborhood council and had landed her in 3 public meetings in 2 weeks where people had yelled about property values. I told her about the Dundas Brewpub, which had just passed final inspection, and how the owner had called me at 7 in the morning to say he'd stood in the empty space alone and cried a little, in a good way, and I'd had to pretend I found this unremarkable when actually it was exactly why I did the job. Carol looked at me over her mug. You do that a lot. What? Underplay the thing that actually matters to you. I sat with that. Sasha said something similar. She's perceptive. She just doesn't always apply it to herself. Carol set down her mug. Can I ask you something? Yes. Why were you so unhappy at that birthday dinner? I looked at the table, then up. Because I already knew it wasn't right, and I didn't have the courage to say so, and I was standing in a room full of her friends feeling like a very convincing prop. Carol nodded slowly. And now? Now I'm sitting across from you, which feels like the opposite of that. Her expression shifted. Not dramatically. Just something arrived in it that hadn't been there before. You're harder to dismiss than I expected, she said. Should I apologize for that? No, she wrapped both hands around her mug. But I want to be honest with you. Please. I am attracted to you. She said it plainly, the way she said everything. I'm also aware that there are approximately 12 reasons that's complicated, and I'm the kind of person who makes a list before she makes a decision. That sounds wise. It is. She looked at me steadily. It's also lonely. That word landed in the specific way that true things land. I didn't say anything. I let it be there. I'd like to see you again, she said finally. If that's something you're actually prepared for. Not the idea of it. The actual it, which includes Sasha and whatever she makes of this, and the fact that my life is not small and I won't be making it smaller. I don't want you to make it smaller. Some men say that, I mean it. She studied me. I think you do. A pause. That's a little terrifying. I'm terrified too. Of what? I thought about it honestly. Of being someone who finally gets it right and still finds a way to get it wrong. Carol looked at me for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and put her hand briefly over mine. Not lingering. Not romantic, exactly, just contact. Acknowledgement. That, she said quietly, is the most honest thing anyone's said to me in a long time. We left separately. At the door, she pulled on her coat and said, I'm going to tell Sasha. I went still. Okay, not to ask permission, to not lie to my daughter. She looked at me evenly. That's non-negotiable. I understand. She nodded. I'll call you after. She walked out into the Lock Street afternoon, and I stood in the doorway of a coffee shop with my heart somewhere in my throat, understanding that whatever came next would be either the most complicated thing I'd ever chosen or the truest. Possibly both. Probably both. Sasha called me before Carol did. I was in my car outside my office in Hamilton, eating a sandwich over my laptop bag because I hadn't made time for lunch when the phone showed her name. I answered because not answering felt like a more complicated choice. Graham. Her voice was controlled. Sasha was always controlled when she was most upset. It was one of the things I'd never been able to read correctly when we were together. Hey, my mom told me. Okay, she said she wasn't going to lie to me, so she told me. Last night. A pause. How long has this been happening? It's been 2 coffees and a dinner that I didn't plan. That's not what I asked. I put down the sandwich. Sasha, I never. You didn't, she said it sharply. Then softer. I know. That's the part I've been sitting with since last night. I know you didn't, Graham. You're too earnest for that kind of thing. A long pause. That doesn't mean I'm not angry. You're allowed to be angry. I am allowed. Another pause. When she told me, she seemed like herself in a way I haven't seen in a while, which makes it worse and better simultaneously, and I don't appreciate it. I didn't say anything. There wasn't a right thing to say. You're going to hurt her, Sasha said. Not as an accusation. As a fear. You'll mean well and it'll still land wrong, and she's had enough of things landing wrong. I know, do you? No, I said. Probably not fully. But I want to. The line was quiet for a moment. She's not easy, Sasha said. She's kind, but she's not easy. She'll argue with you about city zoning at 11 at night and be completely right and expect you to engage with that. That sounds good to me. Sasha made a sound that was almost a laugh. Almost. God, you're strange. I've been told. Another silence. Longer this time. Don't make her small, she said finally. That's all. Don't make her feel like she's too much. She spent a long time being managed, and she's only recently stopped accepting it. I won't. And if you do, she said calmly, I'm in Vancouver, and I have a very wide network and a very long memory. Noted. She hung up. I sat in my car with the sandwich going stale, and something expanding in my chest that felt like the last excuse I'd been holding on to finally letting go. Carol called an hour later. Her voice was quieter than usual. She talked to you, she said. Yeah, she was angry with me last night. And then she cried. And then she told me to do whatever made me happy. And then she called me 3 more times to say various things. A breath. She's my daughter. She's also a complete force of nature, and I love her unreasonably. She loves you. I know. A pause. She told you not to make me small. She did. Carol was quiet for a moment. Did that terrify you? No. It made me want to try harder. She exhaled. I heard it clearly. I'm not good at this, she said. I want you to know that up front. I haven't really done this in a long time. I'll probably deflect when I should talk and push when I should wait, and make a planning document at least before making any significant emotional decision. I'll probably underplay things I care about and overthink things I should just feel. We're going to be a disaster, maybe. I looked out the windshield at the parking lot, October maples going copper in the wind. Or we figure it out. Another quiet. Then, dinner, my place. Saturday. I cook, you bring wine, and this time I'm giving you specific instructions about what to bring so we don't repeat the Sleeman's incident. That was perfectly good beer. I'm sure it was. I could hear the smile. Bring a Riesling. Taw's if they have it. I'll text you what I'm making, she did. 40 minutes later, a message arrived. Roast chicken and root vegetables. Nothing impressive, just the thing I actually make well. 6:30. Don't be late. The oven waits for no one. I wasn't late. I was 11 minutes early, sitting in my car at 6:19 on a Saturday reading the text again. She opened the door before I knocked. She had flour on her wrist, and her hair was down, and the house smelled like thyme and roasting garlic and something I didn't have a name for but wanted to walk toward. "You're early," she said. I was anxious. About? I held up the Taw's Riesling. About getting the wine right. She took it from me, looked at the label, and her mouth curved. Finally. She stepped back. Come in before the chicken gets opinions. The kitchen was warm and slightly chaotic in the way of someone who actually cooked rather than performing cooking. There were recipe cards on the counter she'd clearly moved to the side and put back twice. The table was set simply, 2 places, good napkins, a candle she hadn't lit yet. You can light that if you want, she said, nodding toward it. I always feel ridiculous, lighting a candle for myself. I found matches in the drawer she pointed at and lit it. She poured the wine without fuss. We stood in her kitchen and touched the rims of our glasses and didn't say anything for a second that felt very full. Thank you for coming, she said finally. Thank you for the chicken. She smiled. Don't thank me yet. The parsnips might be aggressive. They were excellent, actually. So was everything else. We ate at the kitchen table, and she told me about a city council meeting that had almost come apart over a bike lane, and I told her about a client who'd asked me to make a financial advisory office look powerful but approachable, and I'd spent 3 days trying to figure out if those two things could coexist in the same room. She said she thought they could. She said the key was not hiding the structure, let the bones show, just make the surfaces human. I looked at her across the table. That's actually useful. I know. Perfectly deadpan. I'm occasionally a resource. After dinner we washed up together and she told me I was loading the dishwasher wrong, and I told her I had been loading dishwashers for 15 years. And she said, and yet. I told her about the text from the guy she'd been supposed to meet the night we had dinner, the one who'd canceled. I asked if she'd ever heard from him again. She said no, and then said she'd looked him up out of curiosity, and he was back on the app with new photos, and she'd felt nothing except mildly philosophical. I said that sounded healthy. She said it sounded like progress, which was not always the same thing. We moved to the living room and sat close enough on the couch that our shoulders were almost touching. She had her legs tucked beneath her. I had my wine glass. We talked about the city, about work, about the particular loneliness of being competent and organized and still ending up further from what you wanted than you meant to be. At some point, she stopped looking at the middle distance and looked at me. I like this, she said quietly. Talking? You, she said it simply. Being in a room with you doesn't make me feel like I have to manage anything. My chest tightened in the good way. Good, that's rarer than it should be, I know. She was quiet for a moment. Then, Graham, yeah, I'm not going to be careful about this anymore. She met my eyes. I was going to be careful. I had a plan. I was going to take it slowly in a very structured and reasonable way. And then you came over and lit my candle and were wrong about the dishwasher and She stopped. I don't want to be careful. I set down my glass. Carol. Yes, I have been thinking about you since a parking garage in October. Every day. In the way that tells me this is not a convenient feeling I can wait out. She looked at me. What does that mean? It means I'm in. I said it simply. Not because you need someone. Not because this is a good idea. Because it's you. Her expression did the thing I'd been watching it do since the moment I'd stopped walking in that garage, moved through something, opened on the other side. Come here, she said. I did. She kissed me first. Certain, quiet, exactly like her. No performance, no hesitation, just the real thing. Her hand came up to the side of my face, and I leaned into it like I'd been cold for a while without registering it. When we pulled back, she kept her hand where it was. Her eyes searched mine. Then she gave a small, real laugh. Well, she said, yeah, I still think we're going to be a disaster, possibly, but a willing one. Yeah. I covered her hand with mine. A willing one. 5 months later, Sasha came back to Hamilton for a long weekend. She and Carol had breakfast Saturday morning, just the two of them, which Carol had wanted and Sasha had agreed to after approximately 17 texts. I had coffee at my own place and waited. Carol called at 11. She wants to have dinner with us tonight. With us. Both of us. Together. At a restaurant. A pause. She said, and I'm quoting directly, I'm not going to pretend this is normal, but I'm also not going to spend my whole visit performing feelings I don't actually have. I laughed. That's very her. It's exactly her. I could hear Carol smiling. She also said to tell you she looked up the Dundas Brewpub project, and it was, quote, fine, whatever, she's seen worse. High praise. Staggering. Dinner was Italian on Hess Street, Carol's choice. Sasha was already there when we arrived, sitting with her coat on and a glass of water, scanning the menu with the specific focus of someone who was going to order exactly what she wanted and not apologize for it. She looked up when we came in. Her eyes moved from Carol to me, then to our hands, which were just barely not touching. Hey, she said. Hey, I said. Carol sat down and reached across to squeeze Sasha's hand, and Sasha let her, and something complicated moved through the table and then receded. We ordered. Sasha told us about Vancouver and Piers and the condo they were looking at in Kitsilano. I told her the brewpub had won a regional design award, and she said, fine, that's genuinely good, congratulations, and looked like she meant it. Carol talked about the bike lane project, which had finally passed, and Sasha asked follow-up questions that made clear she'd actually been paying attention over the years when Carol talked about work. Halfway through the main course, Sasha looked at me directly. You're not what I expected, she said. What did you expect? I don't know. Something that made more sense. On paper, she stabbed a piece of her arancini. You're quieter than I remembered. I was performing when you knew me. She glanced at her mother. Yeah. Something moved through her expression. Not resentment, something more considered than that. She's not with you. Performing. I noticed. Carol started to say something and Sasha held up a hand. Let me finish. She put down her fork. I'm not here to be gracious. I'm here because I love my mom and this is real now and I don't want to be the thing standing between her and something that's actually real. So, she looked at me evenly. Don't screw it up. Try harder than try. Sasha, Carol said. I mean it kindly, Sasha said. Then, to me, I actually do. I nodded once. I know you do. She picked up her fork. The conversation moved on. By dessert, we were talking about something else entirely. A podcast Carol had started listening to about urban infrastructure history that Sasha found objectively nerdy and was clearly about to download the moment she got home. Outside on the sidewalk afterward, Sasha hugged Carol for a long time. Then she turned to me and extended a hand. I shook it. Okay, she said. That was all. But it was enough. Carol and I walked back to where I'd parked on a side street off Hess. The December air sharp and clear and smelling like cold pavement in someone's fireplace. She tucked her hand into my arm. That was hard, she said. It was, and necessary. Yes. She leaned her head briefly against my shoulder as we walked. Thank you for staying for it. I covered her hand with mine. I wasn't going anywhere. A year after I found her in that parking garage on James Street, Carol got a commendation from the city for the North End housing project. The neighborhood council voted 16-3 in support, which Carol described as a complete reversal driven by good data and the fact that I outlasted them. I took her to dinner at Marisol to celebrate, the nicest place I could get a reservation on a Thursday, and she wore a burgundy dress, not the same one, but close. And when she looked at me across the table, she looked like someone who'd stopped waiting for things to go wrong. We drove home through the lit streets of Hamilton, her hand resting on mine at the gear shift, the radio low. She was telling me about a new proposal that had just landed on her desk. Something about adaptive reuse of a decommissioned industrial building on the waterfront, and what the city owed its own history, and whether infrastructure could hold meaning the way people wanted it to. I listened the way I'd wanted to listen to someone for years. At a red light on King Street, she stopped mid-sentence. You're not actually worried about the adaptive reuse framework, are you? I'm hanging on every word. She looked at me sideways. Liar. I like watching you think. She was quiet for a second. Then she turned back to the windshield and I saw her smile in the reflection of the glass. Keep doing that, she said. Which part? All of it. Her fingers turned and folded through mine. All of it. The light changed. We drove home through a city she'd spent 19 years helping build, and I thought, I was 12 minutes late to an engagement party, and I didn't walk past, and everything since then has been the consequence of that choice. I'd make it again. Every time.